3 months ago, I foolishly entered the 4-kilometre individual pursuit at the British Track Championships, which not only requires me to be in the best physical condition possible, it also requires a pretty specialist bike and equipment setup in order to help me ride as fast as possible. So in this video, I'm going to show you all of the equipment that I'm going to be using so that I'm hopefully not left looking like an absolute plonker with all the gear and no idea. Now, if you want to see how I actually get on in the event, well, we're going to have a video over on GCN that's going to cover all of that stuff. But here on GCN Tech, well, we're going to dive through all of the nerdy good tech stuff and explain what on earth I'm going to be using. Now, before we dive on to looking at the actual bike, which would be the logical place to start, the first thing we're going to talk through briefly is how on earth you should modify your bike and why I'm using such specialist equipment like this. So we need to look at what the demands of the event or the race that you're doing are. Now, in the case of what I'm doing the 4-kilometre individual pursuit. So we've got a standing start, and then I've effectively got to ride at around 55 kilometres an hour for the remaining 4 minutes, 10, 20 seconds. Now, riding at 55 kilometres an hour, the biggest forces that you're going to have to overcome are mostly going to be aerodynamic drag. You're then also going to have to overcome the rolling resistance from the tyres and also your drivetrain efficiency in pretty much that order. Now, it's your body which contributes the most to your overall aerodynamic drag, and that's why it's important to be in an aerodynamic position and use aerodynamic clothing. But what you're trying to achieve when looking at the forces and the demands required for your event is that you really need to focus all of your efforts and resources on the most crucial elements. So in this instance, it's the power that I can produce and reducing aerodynamic drag as much as possible. Now, in order to put this bike together and complete the build, I had to call in quite a few favors. So thanks to everybody that's helped me out. And I guess the first thing we should look at is the frame and the forks. So the frame and fork are from Dolan, a British company, and this is their carbon aero track bike. It also has an aero profiled fork to it. It's got a threaded bottom bracket and some nice little adjusters on the rear dropouts to help me get the wheel central and get the chain tension correctly. Now, when it comes to the wheels, I've borrowed these from our in-house track expert, Manon. Cheers, Manon. These are a lenticular carbon track wheel. They're tubular, and I've adjusted the bearings to be as loose as I possibly could. Now, when it comes to reducing drag in a bearing, Ollie actually did a really good maintenance video about that just a couple of weeks ago. I was gonna take the seals off and replace the grease with oil, but when I started spinning these, they actually spin super freely. So what I've done is just backed off the preload on the axle as much as possible to try and reduce that drag that is in the bearing by the tiniest amount. I mean, is it gonna make me ride any faster? Probably not really, but you know, every little helps. The tubular tyres are Pista Speeds from Vittoria. They're written up on the sidewall as a 23mm wide, but in essence, they do measure up slightly narrower than that, much closer to a 21. These are a velodrome specific tyre, which means they have an incredibly thin casing, a thin tread, and zero puncture protection. But they can be pumped up to incredibly high pressures. On the sidewall, it says they can go as high as 217 PSI, which is absolutely mind-blowing. Now, when you're riding on the silky smooth surface of the velodrome, high pressures are a good thing. And to reach those high pressures, I actually had to go and find a different pump because my normal track pump only goes up to 160 PSI, which is kind of crazy, eh? Oh, actually, one more little detail on the wheels. The front one has got this hex bolt fixing on and an aero-shaped washer to try and reduce the drag. I mean, I don't think it's going to make a vast amount of difference, but all of these little details help, whereas on the back wheel, we've just got standard track nut setup. Up front, it's the real business end of the bike and possibly the most important aspect of any bike. It's the handlebar setup, because it's responsible for putting you, the rider, into an aerodynamic position. Now, this is absolutely crucial for a pursuit bike like this or a time trial bike, but in order to put your body into the correct position to be aerodynamic, you've got to have a certain amount of knowledge and understanding in order to achieve that optimal position. Now, you don't have to be an expert to simply head online and look at the setups which riders who have invested a lot of time and research into their position are using. And then by adapting your setup at home and simply using a mirror and a camera, you can modify and assess your position to see and get it as close as possible to what some of the pro riders are using. Nice little chip that. These handlebar extensions are from a company called Wattshop, who are largely considered to be amongst some of the very best to be used when you're riding a track pursuit or in a time trial position. And they have this shape and profile which mimics the profile of your arm when you have it resting in here. They're made from carbon fiber, and then at each end we've got a machined aluminium section to act as the mounting face either onto the bike or where we've got these really neat little hooks for the ends of your hands to go over. So these are 3D printed from carbon infused nylon. What it means is that as you rest your hand onto here, you can just hook your finger or two fingers over the end, and it allows you to get your hands as high as possible while sticking to those UCI rules with relation to the height of your handlebars and how far forwards they are. We've also got some aluminium angled risers underneath here. These are set to about 20 degrees at the moment. I could increase the angle of this, but for the time and the amount of data and research that I've been able to put into the setup of this bike, I do feel like how I've got it at the moment is optimal for what I could achieve for a home setup. The base bar is from Dolan's in-house brand Alpina and actually got supplied with the frame set. It's carbon fiber, it's got an aero shape to it, and it fits onto a traditional stem setup, meaning you've got fantastic adjustability and get my position set up just right. It's 40 centimeters wide, and get this right, how cool are these? These little bar end caps are custom made. So I headed over to see Tom Sturdy of Sturdy Bikes, and within 10 minutes of visiting him and saying, hey, like, I've got this idea, can you 3D print me some aero-shaped bar end plugs? 10 minutes, they were designed on the computer. 2 hours later, they were printed. So these were printed on an SLA 3D printer. SLA stands for stereolithography. Essentially, how this printer works is it fires a UV laser beam into a vat of liquid photosensitive resin, and then as the laser fires onto certain areas, it cures the resin and then builds it up into certain individual layers to end up with your finished product. Now, I think these are super cool, and the fact that I've had them made locally, it fills me with joy to think stuff like that still exists. Anyway, cheers, Tom. The saddle is exactly the same as what I use on all of my bikes: road, cyclocross, gravel, mountain bike. It's a Cellitalia Novus Boost. This is a short nose saddle. It's got a carbon infused base, carbon fiber rails, and a large central cutout. And it's positioned as far forwards as I could possibly get on this bike, whilst also sticking to the UCI rules, which are the nose of the saddle has to be at least 5 centimeters behind the vertical line passing through the bottom bracket. Although, to be honest, comfort isn't really something that's going to be crucial in this event. It's under 5 minutes long, and when I'm in the aero time trial position, I only really sit on that front couple of inches of the saddle, so yeah, comfort's not at the top of the priority list, is it? Okay, onto the lower section of the bike now, and there's a lot going on down here. We've got the crank, the chain ring, the pedals, the bottom bracket, the chain, and the sprocket. Essentially, all of the components which are going to make the bike actually go somewhere. The crank is from Sagino. It came supplied with a frame. The crank arms are 170 millimeters long, and they use a 24 millimeter axle. The chainring is an absolute whopper. It's got 63 teeth and is from Pyramid Cycle Design, a UK company, and I believe this chainring is manufactured in the UK, which is kind of cool. The pedals are Wahoo Aero units. These are single-sided and have a dimpled surface on the underside to try and help reduce the aero drag when they're clipped in and sit super flush to your feet. The chain is a standard track chain from Miche, but it is waxed and got some special coatings on there, but I'll get onto that in a second. And then the sprocket is a standard track sprocket, and it's got 15 teeth. Now, in terms of the gearing, using a 6315, let me put a little chart up on screen at the moment, and then that'll give you an indicator of the different speeds that you can ride at and the different cadence which is required to hit those speeds. And you can see that there is a small window that I've got to work in here, so hopefully I've got my gearing right for this event. Otherwise, there's a good chance it could quite go horribly wrong. Now, onto the chain next. Okay, so chain prep. I did spend some extra time on this and also searched out the advice from Josh Portner from Silka, who are our new cleaning and lubricant partner. So I started with a perfectly clean and grease-free chain, and then I waxed it with this. This is Silka's Hot Wax X, and it is the like uber top end crazy fancy wax from Silka. This tin here costs like $200, which is kind of crazy, but it is infused with nanine, and independent tests have shown this chain wax to be the fastest that's out there. Now with a price tag like this, you're gonna need to be the type of person who wants to take drivetrain efficiency to like mega nerd levels. Otherwise, a product like that, it just isn't really gonna be for you. So I have run the chain in on the rollers by riding easy for like 10 kilometers, and that has loosened off the wax and freed the chain off. And that was what Josh advised in order to help make the chain reach its peak efficiency levels. And he also advised this, right? So this is something else from Silka. It's called like Ultimate Graphene Spray Wax. So Josh suggested that I should clean the chainring and the sprocket and then apply this, let it dry to a haze, and then polish it up. And he says the graphene, which is infused into the wax, will make a super smooth surface, help the chain glide even faster over the chainring and sprocket. Now, I'm not convinced that that is actually gonna make any difference whatsoever to me, but I've gone through the process of doing it anyway because I'm doing all of these little marginal gains on this bike, and in theory, surely if I do enough marginal gains, they'll all add up to something which will help me ride a little bit faster. So that's the bike done and dusted. So let's have a quick run through of all of the kit that I'm going to be wearing. It makes sense. Let's go top to bottom first, starting with the TT helmet I'm going to be using. So this is the Giro Aerohead. And as you can see, it's a time trial aerodynamic designed helmet. You can see from the shape of it. We've got a couple of vents on the front, which I may well actually tape up with some white electrical tape if I can, because I'm not exactly going to overheat in the space of 4 minutes. It's cold. I've used it in some of the training and practice I've been doing at home, and if I can keep my head down in the good position, the helmet pretty much sits as a straight line with my back, and is going to give a really effective aerodynamic position. Going to reduce the amount of power which I need to ride at a certain speed, which is going to be great for the event I'm doing. Now, when it comes to clothing, look at this bad boy from Castelli. So this is the body paint suit, and it's an ultra tight fitting garment. So much so, right, that the first suit Castelli sent me through was a prototype version for one they're going to release in the coming weeks and months. And it was that tight, basically I just didn't fit into it. So I've kind of donated it to Ollie with his little skinny body. So this is a large, and it is ultra, ultra tight. So when you're in the time trial position, none of this material is bunching up around your shoulders. It sits super tight. And then on the back, look at this, we've got this little number pocket. So this is clear, that means I can put the number in from the inside, and I haven't got to have any pins and flappy numbers hanging around on the back. It's got little grippers on the sleeves and on the shorts to help hold them in place. And this should make me speedy and slippery through the air. Right, moving down towards the feet and legs now. So these are my normal road shoes. They are from DMT, they're the KR0, fitted with my Wahoo Speedplay cleats. As I mentioned earlier, these have a nice aero profile to them, and then when you're using the aero pedal as well, it sits super flush and means that there's less disruption of the airflow underneath your foot. So these are my standard road shoe, and then fitted over the top of them, I'm going to be using these, which is an aerodynamic overshoe. And then finally, just like a car does, I'm gonna need some fuel to go. So to fuel me through this event, even though it's under 5 minutes long, I'm gonna use one SIS caffeine gel. I know I've got two here, but I haven't decided which flavor I'm gonna use. Double espresso with 150 milligrams of caffeine, or cola with 75 milligrams. Chances are I'll just go double espresso, get all the caffeine in me. And yeah, that kind of wraps up all of the kit check and all of the stuff which I'm going to be using during the event. Now, do let me know in the comment section down below what you think of all of the equipment and the setup that I've got. And also, if you want to see how I actually get on in the event, head over to the GCN channel and you can see, well, you can see how I get on. Right, I'm out of here. The event starts in like 4 hours or something. I'm actually getting a bit nervous. Right, see you later.